Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
A few years ago, in 2008, a native friend and I went up to the Northwest Territories on a hunting trip. A little background: I live in Alberta and I'm in the Canadian Army, 3rd Canadian Division. So I'm a good tracker. My friend, who we will call Pannoowau, which is his surname, is Algonquian, also a good tracker. He also lives in Alberta, but was born on a reservation. His family had taught him all the legends and customs when he was growing up, but he handles modern society well. Anyway, we drove for a long time. I wasn't keeping track, but it was more than just a few days. We were headed to a heavily forested region west of the Great Slave Lake. Pick related. I believe that's the general area where this happened. There were no government roads back there, so the drive was rough. The snow was also shit, but we were both used to it and loved cold weather anyway. When we had found a good spot to park, we got our things out of the bed of my truck and began our trudging through the snow to find a place to set up camp. We wanted to camp in a place a few kilometers from where we parked to give us a bit of a challenge. Even though there was very heavy snow, the place was beautiful. The nature was completely untouched. I tried snapping a few shots with my phone, but none of the pictures came out good. It was disappointing, but at least the drive was worth it. After walking for about 3 hours, we came into a clearing in the trees and made the decision that it was where we would set up camp. I began setting up our 2-person tent, and Pannoowau was clearing the snow off of the ground to prepare a fire pit. I had set up the tent in our sleeping bags and helped Pannoowau with the fire pit. Once that was done, I told him to follow me to find some firewood. He nodded, understanding that it was going to be dark soon and we would need a fire. We both had hatchets with us and began chopping branches off some of the pines close to camp. The wood was wet, so it was going to be difficult to get it dry for the campfire. We had a good stack of thick branches and carried them back. When we returned, there were tracks in the snow that weren't ours. They seemed to be a kind of morphed human footprint. Pannoowau and I exchanged strange looks and set our wood piles in the area that was cleared for a fire. "You think someone else is camping nearby?" I asked. Pannoowau shrugged and replied,
"I can't say for sure. A normal person wouldn't walk in the snow barefoot."
We returned to our tent and took our rifles out of their carrier cases. Now alert. We should get the fire going now. We've probably got an hour left of sunlight, I said. I headed to the pit, set up some of the wood, covered it with some dry hay that I had brought for fire starting, and got to work on the flint. The fire died out early, so we tossed our beers in a plastic bag and headed into the tent. I got in my sleeping bag and fell asleep quickly. I was awoken late at night by the sound of snow crunching. I got out of my sleeping bag as silently as I could, but the movement seemed to alert whatever was outside, and the snow crunching stopped. I shook Pannoowau until he woke up. He knew I wouldn't have woken him up unless it was something serious. I pointed to the tent door and grabbed my rifle. Pannoowau grabbed his as well. I practically tore the zipper down and snapped my rifle up as fast as I could, stepping out of the tent slowly. Pannoowau held a flashlight in one hand and his rifle in the other, pointing the light in all directions. Nothing, except more footprints like we had found earlier. Something was definitely following us. "I'll get a fire going. Don't you let go of that rifle," I told. Pannoowau nodded and held his rifle with both hands. I got a fire going as fast as I could and pulled my rifle from around my arm and sat close to the fire. We sat there until sunrise, feeling watched the entire time. I was sweating even though it was probably 5 degrees out. When it was light enough, we made a quick breakfast and decided we would track whatever was following us. For the next 4 hours, we were following a very faint trail. We couldn't be sure what we were following was what made the tracks at camp or just wildlife. Regardless, we were led to a carcass forced onto a branch of a tree. Basically, it was as if someone had torn a caribou in half and forced the second half onto a branch. It smelled awful and was partially frozen. It seemed like it had been there for at least a day or two. We continued following the trail, but the smell of death and decay never left. Somewhere along the walk, we had heard a very distant but also very distinct shriek of some sort, like the sound a pig makes when it's being butchered while still alive. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up.
We should turn and leave.
Why?
Bad spirits walk among us.
I gave him a kind of what the fuck are you talking about look, and replied, are you sure? I'd like to know what the hell is out here.
Your curiosity is going to get us killed.
I sighed and nodded, letting Pannoowau take point on the walk back. I didn't recognize anything on the way back, not even the dead caribou on the tree. Are we lost? I asked. Pannoowau stopped and turned to me and said,
I don't know. The trail vanished only minutes after we turned back.
I was pissed. Why the fuck didn't you say anything?
I didn't want to alarm you. I figured if we walked in the same direction we came, we would get to the camp. Even our own tracks are gone. We need to stop now and figure out where in the hell we are.
I took my backpack off and opened it up, searching for my map and compass. While I was busy in my backpack, I saw Pannoowau scramble for his rifle from the corner of my eye. He brought it up and fired off 3 rounds. I looked at him and said, what happened? I also brought up my rifle, but noticing Pannoowau's face was white as the snow on the ground.
Wendigo.
He said, what? Pannoowau didn't reply. He simply began backing up and beckoned to me. I closed my backpack, put it on, and we both jogged through the trees. We had now been out there for close to 7 hours, and the sun was going to set soon. I took duct tape from my bag and secured a flashlight on the end of my rifle, handing the tape to Pannoowau for him to do the same. We were no longer jogging, but picking up the pace indeed. We wouldn't be able to track anything in the dark. We were feeling watched all the time and kept hearing branches snapping only meters away. Somehow, though, we found our camp. By this time, it was already dark. We packed up our things as quickly as we could and left the non-essentials behind. Our tent had been torn open as well as our bags. It was very obvious that something was here, right as we were about to depart. I shined my flashlight at the tree line that we had just come out of. What I saw made my animalistic instincts kick into hyperdrive. It looked so skinny that its bones were almost pushing out of its skin. The eyes appeared so sunken, almost black, and the bony fingers were jagged like twigs. It was just standing there, watching us, a viscous black fluid dripping from its mouth. I gasped for air and fired a round, cocked the rifle, fired again, and again. My hands were shaking badly. Pannoowau now had also begun firing. Once the smoke had settled, the thing was gone. We were now sprinting to find my truck. I wish we hadn't parked so far away. We had no idea what our surroundings were, only what direction we were going. Everything was dark except for the straying beams of our flashlights. I was so exhausted, and I was now running entirely off of adrenaline. We heard the screams again, but this time it didn't stop and we were much closer to us. I turned while running. Where the fuck was Pannoowau? I stopped running, knowing the danger, but I was not going to leave my friend behind. I shouted his name multiple times, only hearing the ghastly, inhuman screeches in return. I shined my flashlight at the trees, desperately looking for any sign of him. He was gone. Then I saw movement. A lot of movement. This was no longer just one thing hunting me. This was many things hunting me. I didn't want to leave Pannoowau behind, but my brain screamed at me to fucking run. Whatever they were. They were now only 1 to 3 meters from me, and my body just kind of turned and began sprinting on its own. At least that's what it felt like. I now knew what it was like to be the gazelle being chased by the lion. I felt nothing but fear. I have no idea how long I was running, but at one point I broke out of the trees and into the road. I was ecstatic and continued sprinting down the road until I spotted my truck. I tore my keys from the lanyard on my backpack, and as soon as I got to the door, I shoved the keys in and threw myself onto the seat. I locked the door hoping it might do some good, and started the engine. The headlights went on, and there he was. Standing in front of the car was Pannoowau. I screamed, "Get in the car," instead of running to the passenger door. He twitched and seemed to float towards the driver's door. My instincts once again kicked in and I slammed the pedal. I was practically flying down the iciest roads you could imagine. I have no idea how I didn't wreck and die. I didn't slow down until I was back on the government road. I was almost crying the entire time. When I got to the nearest town, I told the police what happened. I left out the Wendigo part, fearing they would dismiss my story as a joke. I told them my friend's name, where we had camped. I left them my phone number and started my drive back to Alberta. I couldn't wait to get back home. They still haven't found him.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.